There are a ton of lens options out there and it can be really confusing as to which one best suits your needs. But after years of making videos, I've realized that there are only about 2 lenses that you need to create great results. So in this video, I'll be breaking down which 2 lenses I find to be most useful and why.
You gotta just press record.
Hey, what's up? Nate here with Think Media. Now there are going to be 2 different kinds of lenses you're going to encounter when you're shopping, a zoom lens and a prime lens. A zoom lens is going to give you flexibility because it covers multiple focal lengths. This means you can zoom in and zoom out and adjust your camera frame without actually having to physically move your camera. This is incredibly convenient for creators who need to get a variety of shots very quickly. Prime lenses, on the other hand, are a little bit more specialized. They have a fixed focal length, meaning you can't zoom in or out. But because of this, prime lenses usually offer better image quality. They're sharper and often have a wider aperture, which allows more light into your camera. This is especially useful if you want to create a blurry background so you can make yourself pop out in the scene. And because each type of lens has its own strength, I think every creator should have at least one of each. Which brings me to my first lens recommendation, which is the Sigma 18-50. Now, if you have an APS-C camera like the Sony ZV-10 that we recommend here at Think Media, I think the Sigma 18-50 is a fantastic choice. Here's why. Number one, unlike most zoom lenses, this is very small and lightweight, which makes it perfect for carrying on the go if you're looking for a minimal setup. Number two is it has a constant f2.8 aperture, which means as you zoom in, the light is not going to change and therefore you don't have to again adjust your exposure settings. Also, because it has an f2.8 aperture, it's going to allow more light into the camera, which is going to help it in low light scenarios. And third, the zoom range is great for those who are looking for flexibility. At 18mm, I can comfortably film a talking head video, but then if I want to film some B-roll of specific products, I can zoom in to 50mm and have that option. And having all this flexibility in one lens allows me to capture a variety of shots without ever having to swap out my lens, which actually saves me time. One of my favorite features of this lens is it has a close minimum focus distance of 4.8 inches. So if I were to hold this tape measure from the camera body, I can focus just about an inch away from the lens, which allows me to get a lot of close-up details without having to buy a macro lens. Of course, when you're buying a lens, you can look at different brands. Sony makes their own lenses for their cameras. However, they tend to be really expensive, and there are some great third-party lenses that have really great image quality at a fraction of the price. I highly recommend checking out Sigma or Tamron if you are on a budget. But if you have a full frame camera, then you will need full frame lenses, which can often be more expensive than APS-C lenses. So that's something to keep in mind when you are buying a camera and what lenses you want to invest in. But if you are on a full frame camera and you're looking for a great lens, I highly recommend the Sigma 24-70 f2.8. Again, this will give you plenty of range to choose from going wide angle at 24, which actually is one of my favorite focal lengths on a full frame, all the way to 70mm to get those nice detail shots. But just look at the pure size difference between these lenses. That is definitely something to also consider if you're traveling with different lenses. Again, you can go for the Sony 24-70, although you'll be spending around $2,300 for a brand new lens, or you could pick up the Sigma for around $1,100. In my personal opinion, I don't think you could notice the difference between the Sony and the Sigma lens, and I would rather spend that extra money on getting a better microphone or getting a better camera rather than just that lens. Now, if you're interested in any of these lenses, I'll leave a link in the description down below to a list of all the gear mentioned in this video. Now, the second lens I recommend is a prime lens, and specifically a wide angle prime lens. As someone who is filming videos of themselves, I found that a wide angle is really useful when you are talking to the camera, as it shows more of your body and more of your environment rather than just on your face. So I find that a focal length of less than 20mm is actually a very comfortable field of view for me to show off my environment, but also being relatively close to the camera. And because you can be closer to the camera, it is nice so you can actually adjust settings, but it also creates a more intimate feel in your videos. Whereas if I were to shoot on a longer lens like 35mm, it's going to create a more distant feel, and it might feel more polished and more professional if you prefer that. So focal lengths can play a huge part of how you want your audience member to feel. Which brings me to my next point of having a wider angle allows you to kind of crop in post-production, scale up your footage to kind of create multiple camera angles. So this is really helpful for masking some jump cuts that might appear in the video and just makes it a little bit more interesting to watch. So when it comes to my recommended wide angle prime lens, I'm also taking a look at its maximum aperture. So something like f1.8 or f1.4, that's going to allow a lot of light into the camera, and it's going to be helpful for two things. A, for low light scenarios, if you want to have more light onto your camera, you can reduce your ISO and get a better, sharper look, but also it can kind of create a blurry background, which helps separate you from that background. So the lens I chose actually does both really well. It is the Sigma 16 f1.4. 16mm on an APS-C camera like the ZV-10 or FX30 is going to give you a really nice talking head field of view, which is going to be really helpful if you are filming yourselves, and the maximum aperture of f1.4 is going to let in a lot of light into your camera and also going to create that blurry background. And putting this lens onto your camera is just going to make it feel like a whole new camera. You get such a great looking shot. This is one of our all-time favorite lenses here at Think Media, and we have a full review if you want to watch that. I'll leave a link in the description down below. When it comes to picking up a wide angle prime lens for full frame cameras, again, there are several different options you can choose from, but one of my favorites, I'm actually shooting with this lens right now, is the Viltrox 16mm f1.8. Now this is a 16mm field of view on a full frame camera, which is actually going to give you an extremely wide angle. But most full frame lenses that are this wide only have a maximum aperture of f2.8. This lens, on the other hand, can go down to 1.8. So even though I have a crazy wide angle shot, I've actually got a little bit of shallow depth of field back there. It's slightly blurred, but this lens is fantastic. I really love the image quality. And it's also pretty affordable when it comes to full frame lenses at around $580. And maybe you don't need this wide angle of a lens. I will just tell you the reason why I decided to go with something this wide is I wanted something that I could kind of mount onto my desk but still see my hand expression, see a bit of the table. And this 16mm lens was the only one that could actually do it well. I suppose a wider angle lens could, but you get my point. But don't go out and just pick up this focal length just because I told you to. What I would recommend if you are starting off is go to your zoom lens and figure out which focal lengths do you actually use the most. Do you shoot a little bit wider at 24, or maybe you're tighter at 50 or 70mm? Then either pick up that exact focal length you use all the time, or pick up a focal length that will complement it. So for me, I already have the coverage of 24 to 70. I needed something a little bit wider, so I decided to go with something even wider at 16mm. So we covered the benefits of prime lenses and zoom lenses. I kind of want to walk you through a few different scenarios on when I would use each type of lens. For about 80% of my filming needs, I am going to use a zoom lens, as it basically has all those different focal lengths, and if I want to change things up, I can simply move in and not have to worry about swapping a lens, especially if I go outdoors. If you're filming out on a beach or different terrain, you don't necessarily want to swap a lens out there. So just having a zoom lens anytime I go outdoors, I just want the reliance and the flexibility of having a zoom lens. So no matter where I go, I know I have the focal lengths that is actually going to be useful to me. Now, if I have time to dial in my shot, let's say as a talking head camera setup that I'm not going to be adjusting all the time, that's where I do like a prime lens. Because I know I'm not going to be adjusting the camera frame every time I want to use this setup, it's dialed in exactly how I want it. I'm just able to turn it on, press record, and I'm good to go. I'd also use a prime lens if I'm shooting in low light scenarios because they allow more light into the camera thanks to a faster aperture. It means I get better low light performance and get just a little bit better in those darker scenarios. But having these two style lenses in your kit, they really do complement each other, and that means you can get about 90–99% of what your needs are between these two lenses. And sure, as you begin to grow, you might actually need different focal lengths depending as your needs change. For example, because we can only go up to 70 millimeters, I can't actually get super far zoomed in shots, so I might rent out a telephoto lens if and when I need that. I will mention that lenses are often overlooked, but they're actually better investments than spending all your money on the latest camera, because chances are you're going to be upgrading your specific camera in a few years' time when the latest thing comes out. But your lenses, on the other hand, you can keep these for several years, even decades. And that's because lens technology doesn't grow as fast as camera technology. So if you are looking to invest in different cameras, I would take a look at possibly spending on some good quality lenses that you're actually going to use. In fact, there's a saying, you want to marry your lenses and date your camera bodies, and that's a kind of funny way to look at it. You can find links to all the gear I mentioned in the description down below, and if you want to take your videos to the next level, get the most out of your camera settings, your lighting, your lenses, your audio, then check out this video where I break down an entire YouTube studio setup for less than $1,000.